Welcome to Courting Justice at the Coffee House. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. There are over 2 million people in the nation's prisons and jails, in large part because of extremely harsh federal and state drug laws and policies. Nkechi Taifa is one of the nation's leading advocates for criminal justice reform and has been working on these issues for decades. She joins me today to talk about the latest developments and prospects for reform. Welcome, Nkechi, to the Coffee House.
I'm so glad to be here, Angela.
You have been working on all of these issues for quite a long time, but eliminating the disparity between crack and powder cocaine drug laws has truly been one of your main efforts. And I want to talk about some recent developments, but before we do that, can you explain what this issue is? What is this disparity between crack and powder cocaine?
Sure. Angela, for nearly 25 years, the federal government has sentenced those convicted of possessing or selling small quantities of crack cocaine far more severely than those convicted of possessing or selling other quantities of drugs. And what has come to be known as the 100-to-1 ratio, it takes 100 times the quantity of powder cocaine to receive the same sentence as one convicted of crack cocaine. What that actually means is that if you have 5 grams of crack cocaine, 5 grams, you receive a mandatory sentence for a first-time nonviolent offender of at least 5 years in prison. But it takes 500 grams of powder cocaine to get that same 5-year sentence.
So when you say 5 grams, can you give me an example?
I want to break it down for you right now because many of us grew up in the educational system and we don't quite understand grams, et cetera, et cetera. Exactly. So I'm going to break it down very graphically. We're here at the coffee house and we have a coffee cup right here. The amount of sugar that most people put in their coffee cup, a couple of packs of sugar, this is what 5 grams is. This quantity, if it were drugs, if it were crack cocaine, would give a first-time nonviolent offender 5 years in prison. We're not talking about large-scale drug kingpins. Mm-hmm. We're talking about very, very low-level players in the drug trade, many of whom should have treatment as opposed to incarceration. But it gets even deeper because this disparity between crack and powder cocaine has a disproportionate impact on communities of color.
Why is that?
Well, some people might say it's because more blacks use crack than whites. The evidence and the science, the statistics do not bear that out. The studies have shown that overwhelmingly more Caucasians use crack than African Americans, but it is the manner in which law enforcement is deployed in primarily communities of color that has accounted for the large numbers of African Americans who are arrested, convicted, and incarcerated for these low-level crack cocaine offenses.
So more police officers are deployed in communities of color to actually do drug busts than in white communities?
Oh, absolutely. All communities use drugs. I mean, that's a well-known fact. All communities use drugs. But if you have the overwhelming amount of police resources in one community and not in the other, obviously more people from those communities that are more heavily enforced are going to be subject to the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. In higher numbers.
So the result is that you've got a much larger number of African Americans and other people of color incarcerated for these offenses than whites. Yeah. And when they are, the sentences are much, much longer.
That's correct. And actually, there's no pharmacological distinction between crack and powder cocaine.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because you heard, at least this has been going on for years, people saying, well, you know, crack is more dangerous than powder cocaine, therefore that's the reason why there's a difference in sentencing. Does the science bear that out?
I know it doesn't. First of all, crack is bad, crack is dangerous, crack is addictive, and so is powder cocaine. It's the same pharmacological drug. The only distinction is the manner in which it is ingested. You can't have crack cocaine unless you first have powder cocaine. And in fact, when you have powder cocaine, when you have crack cocaine, you're only talking about a 15-minute difference in a frying pan. Mm-hmm. So to have a sentence that is that much egregiously different, that much harsher for one form of the drug than the other form of the drug, particularly when the enforcement is so dramatically eschewed against one population. It's really irrational.
So this has been going on for years. It's a federal law, but in recent years, there's been some progress, I guess, towards eliminating or at least reducing the disparity, or some opportunities for that, as a result of a Supreme Court case and also maybe some action by the United States Sentencing Commission.
Yeah, well, actually, there has been no time within the past 20-something years where there's been a more activity around crack cocaine and the disparity and the reform with respect to that disparity than there has been at the present time. We have the United States Sentencing Commission, which 4 times over the past number of years has called for an elimination of the disparity. You have the United States Supreme Court, which has said that if judges disagree with these law mandatory sentences, that they have the ability to sentence below the mandatory sentence. You have the judiciary underneath the Supreme Court, who are sentencing not in regard to the mandatory sentence, but sentencing a little bit more rationally. We have the executive branch, Angela, the executive branch. We have the president. We have the attorney general. We have the Justice Department that has called for the complete elimination of this disparity.
Well,
the missing piece of the puzzle?
The legislative branch. And I wanted to ask you about that because I do want to talk a little bit about the Attorney General and his position and what effect you think they might have. But